Rabbi Abraham Cooper from the Simon Wiesenthal Center, welcome back to Jerusalem Dateline.
Thank you. It's good to be back in Jerusalem and on this wonderful program.
Tell us, we've had a number of terror attacks recently. What's your reaction to that, and also to some of the Israeli response, very few numbers that have had a violent response to that? What's your reaction?
First and foremost, I think everybody here is holding their breath with Ramadan coming up, talks about a possible intifada, a whole new generation of young Palestinians who didn't experience the previous two, or they wouldn't even be thinking about it. And the incredible tragedies that are involved. The two brothers who were murdered on a main road in an Arab town, they were on their way back to their yeshivas, to their schools of higher learning. One of them in Kiryat Shmona, an institution I'm very, very familiar with. And just see two young people cut down for no reason, other than the fact that the young terrorist, Palestinian terrorists who came at them, has been basically brainwashed and poisoned. Almost from birth in this culture of death, and fortified by the Palestinian authorities, pay to slay, knowing that even when he gets caught or if he gets killed, his family will be well taken care of. It's enraging, actually, because unless there's a change in the dynamics, we can expect more of these until it escalates into dimensions we don't even want to talk about today. And I think, especially for viewers in the United States, well, what can Americans do? Actually, our Secretary of State, Samantha Power, USAID, the President of the United States, the American taxpayer gives a ton of money to the Palestinians. And you want to change the equation? Basically, call up Abbas and say you have a law on your books that basically rewards terrorists and their families when they murder and maim Jews. We want the law rescinded publicly and an end to it, or we're going to reconsider how much money we're going to be sending. That should be seconded by the foreign secretary in London, the foreign minister in Paris. Germany, Tokyo. This is a moral blank check that has been handed to a corrupt institution. I'm not even talking about Hamas or Islamic Jihad. And as long as pay to slay works for them, and they can keep pointing a finger at Israel as being the aggressor, they can working so hard with, and successfully, with the big lie of labeling Israel an apartheid state across the world, and especially first in academia and now more and more in the mainstream of society. So from the point of view of the cynical, corrupt Palestinian leadership, why would they change anything? But if they don't, we're on a collision course unfortunately, for something much worse. And I know a lot of people said there shouldn't have been that meeting between Jordan, the US, Israel, and the Palestinian authorities that took place basically an hour or two after those shootings. I think it was appropriate to go forward with it, because whatever we can try to do to bring down, to tamp down what's going on right now, we should try. Unfortunately, it's the same script every time. Israel should promise this, Israel should do that, and we're going to do this for the Palestinian Authority, and et cetera, et cetera. It's almost like treating the PA like a bunch of infants. And unfortunately, unless that equation changes, I don't see any real possibility of change. Nonetheless, there's what to do, and that means for people who are watching this segment, contacting their senators, their members of the House of Representatives, calling the White House and the State Department, and basically tell them, look, we hold the checkbook, we have the leverage. We have to begin to use the leverage for peace, and in order to do that, we have to have behavior modification now on the part of the Palestinian Authority.
Yeah, now let's hop over to the other side of the ocean, to the U.S. A group said they were organizing a National Day of Hate. What is that all about?
Christopher Wray, who's the head of the FBI, recently testified before Congress that 63% of all religious-based hate crimes in America target 2.4% of the population, American Jews. And many of those incidents are violent. And that's not even to delve into the fact that on social media, you have an echo chamber for anti-Semitism, for hatred, for terrorism on both sides of the Atlantic. So you have already Jewish communities on edge in places like New York, Chicago, South Florida, Los Angeles. And you have, in most of those cities, depleted police forces and the other social issues about letting criminals out with low bail, et cetera, et cetera. It all kind of converges where we really have deep sense of unease. And on top of everything else, not just 10 days ago, you had 2 days of consecutive shooting of Jewish men in Los Angeles who had just come out of their synagogues who were shot. And thankfully, the perpetrator was caught a few hours after the second shooting, but we could have been at a few funerals. So against that backdrop, the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists who know how to leverage social media, they posted something about this day of hate for the Jewish Sabbath. And law enforcement tried to reassure people. They had police cruisers going past synagogues in the major cities. In the end, thank God there were no attacks, but I don't even know if the people who posted that were actually planning something, but you can see the psychological impact on the community. And we know from history that, it begins with the Jews, it never ends with the Jews.
No, but you've been at a conference here.
Right, there's the annual global conference, a global coalition for Israel. It's called GCI4. I have to write it down at my age. There are so many different conferences. But actually you have people from dozens of countries, all the continents, about 200 participants, with various sessions, including serious updates about Iran, some beautiful things about what Israeli NGOs are doing on a humanitarian basis in Africa. And I'm here to basically share some of my experiences and our ongoing commitment to deepen and expand the DNA of the Abraham Accords. So I've been involved both in the UAE and especially in Bahrain. And we know one thing. We know which model we don't want to follow. Jordan, which signed when the late King Hussein was alive, and it was a different Jordan, a peace treaty with its former enemy. And yet in recent months, you have Jewish and Israeli tourists coming across the border to go to the sites, having their personal religious items confiscated or sending people back. You can't do this, that, and the other thing. And most recently, and shockingly, because we've been meeting with top Jordanian diplomats, and they said, well, the Palestinians, they work those, but not at the airport. Well, a few days ago at the airport, one of the rabbis who was going to his post in the UAE had his phylacteries cut, desecrated by the people at the border in Amman. Now, that's bad enough. It's shocking, and it's especially shocking and galling to see, with all due respect to King Abdullah, who I've met, he's literally getting away with murder. He has the audacity to come to Washington or when he's speaking to Israelis or religious leaders to say, we need a bigger piece of the action to protect the Temple Mount in Al-Aqsa. I would rather deal with the United Arab Emirates, who just opened the Abraham House, or frankly, Saudi Arabia, than deal with the current regime in Jordan. And I think it's an important guidepost. That's something that always motivates me. Governments sign treaties, people make peace.